So this, you might see, is a timer, but you might be a little bit confused as to why it is at a bajillion numbers right now. So when you're in a registered class, it will start at 0 and it will count up as normal. However, this is a temporary classroom, so the timer is going to be a little bit funky because it's been in use for a long time. And because we've never clicked end, it just keeps on counting. So that's the only reason for that. As such, when you're in a temporary classroom, if you're trying to practice your time management, I highly recommend that you have an external timer on your phone, or I've seen teachers have egg timers before for their final demos. So just please take note of one of those things and use that instead of your timer if you're practicing in your temporary classroom, your time management. So the one next to it is a little hard to see because of the Zoom ID, but it just says ongoing, and this is just the status of the class, so whether or not it's ongoing or ended or not yet started. After that, on this side, we have our toolbar. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to do a quick rundown of everything with you. So this little presentation tool, this hand tool, it's useful if you have a PPT with some kind of presentation that requires you to activate an animation by clicking on something, if you click something and it jumps to another slide, or if you have embedded MP3 or MP4 files. You use that hand button to click play and it will play for you. I have an example of a PPT that I'll show you shortly, and we'll just show in practice how that works, but I'm going to get to the other side of our buttons first to show you how to upload and then open a file before giving that example. Otherwise, things are pretty straightforward. So let's say I have some shapes going on here, and whoop, I destroyed that little smiley face. So I want to move this around or reshape it. I use this little tool right here, and that is called the navigator tool, and that just helps me move things around, resize them, shift it depending on how I want it, make it smaller, and it's super useful if you want to just sort of select one thing at a time to do that. The next one is going to be your laser pointer. So much like in a real classroom, you have your little laser pointer to guide the student's eye. This one doesn't make any marks on the screen, so it can be nice if you don't want to sort of make your slide all messy. The next one after that is your crayon tool, and that's of course what I drew all of these shapes with, and it's super versatile, which is awesome both for you as teacher and for the student when they're using it, because this is one of the tools that the student will be able to use. They don't have access to all of these things. It's quite minimal in their case, but this is an awesome way to get them to interact with the materials. They'll be able to circle things, they'll be able to draw things, they'll be able to underline words or just illustrate what they're trying to say and engage with the materials. So it's a fantastic way to really get them involved in the class. After that, we have our little line and arrow tool. And whenever you see this little triangle in the bottom right corner, it means that there are multiple options for this particular tool. So in this case, this is going to either be a straight line, which is great for underlining things, or I like to do boxes around things for my students when I tell them to read certain areas of text, or this arrow tool, which I was using before to point at certain things, which is also excellent for getting them to guide their eye into seeing what they should be looking at, or what they should be reading, or a sentence that they should be making using this particular word. So use that liberally. After that, we have our shapes tool. So this is square, circle, and triangle. Then the next one is this little image tool. So this little mountain and sun. If you click that, just like what happened on my screen, it's going to launch a file navigator window for you. So you might find that it doesn't list all of your files, or at least not in any order that you're familiar with. At least that's how it is on my computer. So what I've done instead is I've put the files and the images that I want to find in the folders that I do see. So I've manually done this, and I can see the files that I might want to upload into my future cloud classroom. So for example, let's go to pictures. I'm going to upload this picture that I particularly like, and it's going to then load directly onto my screen. And all you have to do is just double click that. And what's really great is you can also use the navigator tool to resize, reposition, or move around in general on your screen. So it's great if you're setting up a whiteboard before class and you can prepare your pictures in advance, or know in advance if there's a particular word that's difficult for students to understand, that you can have at quick hand any image you want to just sort of throw into the classroom for the student. All right, after that, we have our text tool. So this one is going to have 3 sizes because it has that little drop-down menu of options. You can see the difference between them. There we go. And I do recommend that you do use one of the larger 2 fonts, simply because most students will be on their iPad and they won't be able to see things as well. So to your discretion, depending on how much space there is on a PowerPoint slide, use whatever works for you, but that is good to note. Also important to note is that although students have access to the text tool, depending on their level and ability, they're not necessarily going to be able to type very well. So just keep that in mind. If you ever ask them to write a word, it might take a long time, or it might not happen at all. Use at your own discretion, but I always use this when my student is talking and I want to take note of what they're saying in real time, and I will write verbatim what they say, and then they can visualize what they're saying and then correct it on the board with me, or if time doesn't allow, I will correct it for them and at least they can see. But that's a great opportunity too for your feedback, because if you write a sentence on the board, you can also copy paste it and then put it into your feedback form, which will be available to you right over here, which I'll go over shortly. If you want to edit text, final note on this, you just go back to this navigator tool and you double click it, and you'll be able to edit the word as much as you want. All right, so after that, we have our colors. So it's a pretty limited color palette over here, but it's better than your students if they're on an iPad because they only have access to blue. So you can always help them out if they want to color in a picture that they're doing in a warm-up or a closing activity, and just offer to color something for them. Or you can just make a point of not using blue if you're both writing on the screen at the same time, so you can differentiate between who's doing what. All right, after that, we have our line tool. And this one has 4 different line thicknesses, which affects the crayon, the line and arrow, and the shapes. So you will be able to affect the line of all of these ones, and that really helps if you're trying to draw attention to something even more so, like let's say I use the extra thick line and I use the arrow, you're going to see how big that is comparatively to the super skinny one. So use this also when you're trying to draw attention to things. It's a good way to show your versatility in future Cloud as well as engage the student a little bit better. Then we have our 2 delete tools. What does what? Why do we have 2? So very simple and very convenient. Let's say you go back to this navigator tool and you don't really like this happy face. You can grab everything by highlighting it there, and then you just click this first trash can tool and it will delete only that item. So it deletes everything that has been selected, but not everything on the screen. Let's say you want to delete everything on the screen, you would click the second one. Ding, and everything disappears. That's great if you want to delete everything all at once, but also if your student has done any modifications on the screen that are maybe not what you had intended, you can get rid of both yours and the student's things at the same time. You can't get rid of the students' drawings otherwise, unfortunately, although fortunately they also can't get rid of yours that way. So that would be the difference between them. It's pretty straightforward. I just recommend you sort of play around with it. And then finally, the only 2 left are pretty simple, and it's just undo and redo. And you might notice that if you undo from an erase all, you won't be able to undo anything before that. So I can't undo and get my smiley face back. It's just going to undo the biggest and last delete. All right, so that is the toolbar. Again, please play around with it on your own. It's pretty straightforward, and it's going to give you more experience and just like a better understanding of it if you are the one doing it yourself. So take some time to do that after this tutorial.